I'm Chris Carter. The purpose of this video is to demonstrate the correct consistency to mix when using watercolor to lay down glazes or washes. I will demonstrate it first with pan pigment. This is pigment that was originally squeezed out of a tube and left in the pan, and it eventually dries, and then I re-wet it. So it has a little bit of a different consistency than the pigment that comes directly out of the tubes. So the second part of this demo, I'll be demonstrating mixing good consistency with pigment straight out of the tube. And it doesn't matter what color I'm using, this is a permanent magenta. And I will add water to it to let it soak in and soften the pigment. What do we do when we want full saturation and we don't want a lot of water, but we still want it to be transparent? And that is the goal of this video, is to show you how I judge the consistency of my mixture so that I will have the darkest dark I can possibly get with a pigment and yet still maintain the transparency. So this is softened up a bit. I could make a smaller quantity of this, but I also want to show you how I mix large enough quantities to fill in an entire closed shape in my Dala art, or when I work in larger watercolor formats where I need to be able to lay the whole wash down without stopping to remix. Otherwise I end up with streaks. So I mix nice big puddles. Now we're going to test this out to start with. Over here. Tip it a bit. Okay, so that's pretty much right on the money. I will wick up the bottom. Now when I wick up, I tip the paper so that the extra watercolor is pulled down by gravity, and I wick it up so it doesn't just sit on the paper and dry in lumps. Okay, now, don't know, you can see that without the sheen. It is not quite opaque. I can see through it. I'll show you now how it looks when it's too thick. I go for a consistency that is between 2% milk and whole milk. Half and half is too thick. All right, that is too thick. The reason is that it's not flowing at all. It's staying right on the paper, and you can see right here, there's too much pigment in there, and that will dry and be opaque, and it might even be a little shiny, because remember, gum arabic is the binder for watercolor, and it will dry shiny. So sometimes if there's too much binder in a pigment, which often is the case in student grade, the pigment, when you mix it, it will seem a little slippery. I call it slippery, and it never really dries, and the reason is because there's too much gum arabic in it. So this one will dry nicely. It will be the darkest dark I can make, and just going a little bit stronger with the pigment to water ratio, I end up with it not flowing. There are streaks there. That is going to be our darkest. This one is too thick. This is perfect. You want to mix values from it. You can start from this puddle. Let's say I just want to go a little bit lighter. I'm going to keep my dark in case I need that for something. And I'll just add a little bit of water from my brush. I just want to show you the difference in the value. All right, so can you see that? This is a lot lighter. But see how much darker you can go with it? if you want to, for your dark darks. You don't have to go and add black to things. You can just go with the full strength of a dark pigment to begin with. We'll try the green. I'm using Cotman, which is Winsor Newton student grade, and this is Hooker's Green Dark, directly out of the tube. Now here what you have to watch out for is that you mix it enough. When it's in the pan, the pigment is hardened, so you can't even pick it up and bring it over here to mix unless it's already started mixing with water, which is why I added that and let it soak. Now with this, it's sort of like a paste, and I could end up, for example, I could say, all right, I'm going to just paint there, and it looks great, you know, goes on nicely, but see, it's not really mixed. So it's dark, light, it's not mixed in with the solution, and maybe that's what you want, but if you're laying down a wash, that's definitely not what you want. And by laying down a wash, I'm talking about doing something where I've got a nice flow going. I will do the same thing with this. I'll add a little, but not as much water. I'll add a little bit of water and let it sit to soak into the pigment. Let the pigment absorb the water a little. Soften it up. And I'm going to work for the same thing. I'm going to go for the darkest Hooker's Green Dark I can make and still be able to apply it in a nice free flow on my paper, maintain transparency, but have it the darkest dark possible. I have the supply of paint here. I don't mix in here because then I've used all this paint and maybe I have it mixed incorrectly. Maybe I have too much water and I can't make it any darker. So I take from my mother's supply and I use other cups to do the mixing. Now this to me is looking like half and half. So I think that that's too thick. Let's test it out. Yep, it is too thick. It's close, but still is a hair too thick. It's not flowing down as nicely as it could. So I'm going to add just a wee bit of water. Not much. Because I still want it dark. And if it's the right consistency, I can let it sit in a bigger puddle. Okay, can you see that puddle moving? I hope that you can see that on the film. The puddle is now moving down. That is perfect. I might be able to get it a little bit darker. I'm going to try. But see how this got stuck right there? That was because there was too much pigment to water. Can you see that line? I just wick up on the bottom. All right, I'm going to see if I can get that a tiny bit darker. So I'm going to go back into here, carefully pick up some more pigment. I'm right on the edge, turned back into half and half. I want to head back towards the whole milk. Okay, that might be good. If you can see this correctly, and maybe we'll see it better when it's dry, you can tell the difference between this, which was too much pigment per water. This was almost perfect, but a little too much water, so it's a shade lighter in value than this one, where the mix between pigment and water is perfect. This is the consistency that you want to look for with your darks. With your lights, it's quite simple. With your lights, just make sure you mix it enough. Almost anything lighter than that's going to flow beautifully. Okay, so you mix it, Just keep adding to your puddle. Runs down nicely. See how it flows? It's beautiful. So the challenge is up here, getting your dark dark. That way it's a gorgeous dark without adding black or without having streaks or lumps or having your darks dry shiny.